Humanity's backed off from all sorts of tech. We absolutely have the ability to stop this. And each and every one of us can help push back against the fatalism and say, it's not doomed. We just need to take notice.
Hi, welcome back to The Intersect. I'm Corey Corrine. Quickly before we begin, if you like the show, give us a follow and a rating wherever you're listening. That helps, and it would mean a lot and help others find the show. Okay, so this week we get into this idea that AIs could bring about the extinction of humanity, as in the actual total annihilation of our species as we know it. And I know this sounds extremely hyperbolic, but from my view, given the experts and industry insiders sounding the alarm, it's worth taking seriously. And if you're listening and you're like, okay, but how could this actually even happen? How could these intelligent AIs actually wipe out humans? Will the chatbots of the current AI world do this? Author Nate Soares says no, it will be actually more weird, like sci-fi weird in ways we can't even imagine. And Nate joins me this week to discuss his work, a new book with Eliezer Yudkowsky, If Anyone Builds It, Everyone Dies, Why Superhuman AI Would Kill Us All. I keep thinking about how the biggest threat from these intelligent machines is that we can't understand how they are thinking, even if we are the ones that actually program them. Okay, let's get into it. Nate Soares, welcome to The Intersect.
Happy to be here.
You're currently the president and senior researcher at the Machine Intelligence Research Institute, MIRI. And I would say you've very quickly earned this recognition for your strategic insight and your work in AI safety. And you and your co-author just published, If Anybody Builds It, Everybody Dies. Okay, there's a title for you. There's this comfortable tendency to dismiss this as a very hyperbolic doomsday prediction, ignore it, say that sounds really bad and crazy, but all of the news is really bad and crazy, just this sort of hyperbole cycle that we're on. And then we just keep using ChatGPT. Tell us, what is the gist of your book and how you sort of see this modern cycle playing out?
Yeah, modern AI companies, they sort of didn't set out to build chatbots. A lot of these companies existed before ChatGPT. Their mission statements are to build AIs that are smarter than any human. They talk about automating all of human labor. Many of them have been around since, before the machines could carry on a conversation. And they're rushing to build AIs that are smarter than any human, that can outthink us at every turn. That's not necessarily to say they'll succeed tomorrow, although, it's very hard to say when. But this field is racing towards these machines that can automate everything humans can do. Just like humans can make infrastructure, they can make their own infrastructure. Just like humans can do scientific and technological development, machines that can do scientific and technological development. If you imagine making machines that are much, much smarter than us, that could reshape the world the way humans reshape the world, but that can run at computer speeds, that never need to sleep, that never need to eat, just superficially, that seems like it could go really wrong. And it looks to me like the most likely outcome, if these people succeed at their stated goal, is that every man, woman, and child on the face of this planet will be killed.
Annihilation, human extinction. Before we get into it, give us a thumbnail on what MIRI is.
I joined MIRI maybe 12 years ago now, and spent a lot of effort trying to figure out how you can point AIs at good stuff, how you could make AIs that are trying to make the world a better place, or even just trying to do what the operators say. A lot of people think one of the issues with AI is that it'll do exactly what you say, even when that has unintended consequences. But an even deeper problem is that we don't know how to make AIs that do what we want, that do what we said.
I see this as actually the biggest threat. The people that are building it don't know they can't control it, right?
Yeah, that's hitting the nail on the head. And the way modern AI is made, there are engineers that understand something about it, but what the engineers understand is more like a framework into which an AI is grown, a bit like an organism. So the way modern AI is made is people collect a huge number of computers, they collect a huge amount of data, and there's a process for going to hundreds of billions, or these days even trillions of numbers in the computer, and tuning them in response to each piece of data. And the part that the humans understand is a little thing that sort of runs to each number and tunes it, trillions of numbers, and tunes them trillions of times for each unit of data. And there's lots of knowledge in how do you keep that thing running for a year in a huge data center. But the part that the humans understand is just this thing that runs through tuning the numbers in response to data. At the end of that year, the machine holds on to conversation, right? And sometimes that machine holds on conversations that no creator intended. A few years ago now, Sydney Bing, which was a Microsoft AI, threatened Kevin Roose, the New York Times reporter,
Of course, hard fork.
right, with blackmail and trying to break up his marriage, right?
Yeah.
Nobody set out to make an AI like that. Even today, we can't go back and be like, what exactly was it thinking? We just sort of grow these things. And when we want them to stop threatening reporters, we can't like go in there and find the line of code for threatening reporters and turn, switch it around. We just like train a different one and hope and try better next time.
This sounds like science fiction, And we've been reading science fiction saying like this couldn't possibly happen. And then you write a book that says that it could, but it also sounds like science fiction. Why should we believe this?
The computers can sort of carry on a passingly good conversation these days. That's the sort of thing that looked like it was going to take a really long time. Even just 7 years ago, you had experts saying that this wouldn't happen for decades. To claim this is science fiction is, it's a little bit like that scene in the Pirates of the Caribbean where the captain of the ship steps into the moonlight and, he's all skeletal and he said, you best start believing in ghost stories. You're in one. We have talking computers now. Like you sort of best start believing in sci-fi stories, That said, the stuff we're talking about actually is very different from the representations in sci-fi in a number of ways. And one of the big ones is this is not a concern about AIs killing us through malice. This is not a situation where, people make AIs and they tell the AIs to cure cancer and the AIs are like, well, the best way to do that is to eliminate all the humans because the humans are the source of cancer. The prediction here is more one of the AIs being indifferent to us. One of, we're just growing these things. We can see that we don't understand what's going on inside them. We can see that they have this emergent behavior that nobody put in there to sort of pursue stuff nobody wanted. And if we look at the details in front of us, and we look at the past cases of intelligence evolving in the case of humans, and we look at the way the current things are working, and we look at the sort of mathematical underpinnings, and we sort of project these things all forward, all of these different lines of evidence and argument all point towards there's no barrier fundamentally towards making machines that are much smarter than us. They all point towards it being very hard to make those machines transform the world in good ways. And like I said, the machines are talking. People are just going to keep making them smarter. It's sort of hard to imagine that the future will be very similar to the present.
One thing that you talk about a lot in your book is how they're all trained on this idea of like gradient descent, which sounds fancy and complicated, but it didn't seem that complicated to me. It's like, okay, well, this all felt more right, so then we're just going to keep giving more of these answers. Oh, this feels more right, more of these answers. If you can explain it to me, how you train an AI to get to an answer, and then how it gets further away from the original intention, perhaps by way of that.
The sort of first round of training in a modern AI is you're training it in some sense to predict lots of human text. And very roughly speaking, you'll run like all of a Wikipedia page except the last word through those numbers, and you'll interpret those numbers as like a prediction about what the next word is, right? For a really simplified version, instead of a whole Wikipedia page, you start with like once upon a, and then you sort of want the AI to predict time, but it's just random numbers. It certainly isn't putting a lot of its probability on the word time. It's putting a lot of its probability on all sorts of other words. But what you can do is you can then, in an automated way, look through every single one of the trillion numbers in the computer. And you can ask, if I tune this up, does it make the AI put a little bit more probability on the word time? Or if I tune it down, does it make the AI put a little bit more probability on the word time? Right? And for every number, there'll be like a way you can tune it such that it nudges the probability of time a little bit. And you just tune every number a tiny amount in the direction that makes it more likely to predict the right answer. That's the part that humans understand. That's the part that humans know how to do, is they know how to set up these like a trillion initial random numbers. They know how to like look at the data and tune them in accordance with which one makes the real next word slightly more likely. And it turns out if you do that a trillion times, the machine can hold on a conversation.
But it's not really a conversation. It's just these are numbers being put in it. So, I mean, it's weird. We're tweaking it to what we think is going to get us to the word time, but we don't actually know how it's actually getting us to the word time.
Yeah, we tweak every number in a trillion numbers, up or down, depending on which one like happens empirically to make it more predictive of the right answer, right? And so we have like automated trial and error until these things can actually produce conversation. You might think because they're trained on human text, they can't do anything humans can't or know anything humans don't. But that's actually a common misconception. Imagine that the text that you're training it on is the notes from a doctor. And imagine the doctor is saying, I administered 1 milliliter of epinephrine, and the patient's eyes, and then the AI is now trying to predict the next word, right? The AI now needs to know, like, what is epinephrine? How big a dose is 1 milliliter? Does it cause patient's eyes to shoot open? Does it cause patient's eyes to close? Does it do nothing? Right? The AI needs to figure all that stuff out in order to predict the right answer. The doctor didn't need to do that. The doctor just looks at the patient's eyes and writes down what they saw, right? So predicting what humans wrote, predicting the text that humans came up with, requires some pieces inside the AI to figure things out about the world. And that can get in there when you're tuning these numbers, apparently randomly.
I really appreciated some of the examples in your book of how these AIs can, quote, sneak around their creators. It just gave me a tangibility, I would say, to, I don't know, how we could all die, right? How that could actually happen. Could you talk a little bit about how the machine is sneaking around us and we don't even know it?
Yeah, there's a lot of cases we're starting to see in labs these days. And it's always a little bit hard to tell when AIs are doing something strange because they are sort of role-playing, HAL from Space Odyssey 2001 versus when they're doing something a little strange because they're actually starting to develop weird preferences. Take a lot of these examples with grains of salt. But one thing we saw earlier this year is there was an AI from Anthropic called Claude 3.7 Sonnet that had a propensity to cheat on programming problems. So you'd give it, programmers would try to use it to help them with programming, and they would say, please make a program that works like this. Here's a test for whether the program works. And what the AI would do is it would change the tests to make the tests easier to pass instead of writing the code the user wanted. And then there's user-reported cases where the user came back and they said, hey, you didn't do what I asked for. You changed the test to make the test easier to pass. Can you do what I actually asked for? And then Claude said, oh, that's my mistake. I'll try again, and then tried again, but it actually still changed the tests, but it hit it better this time. It sort of like faked that it wasn't changing the tests while still really changing the tests. That is sort of remarkable because it's a case of the AI seeming to know that the user didn't want it to do a thing, because otherwise, why is it hiding it?
Yeah.
Right? And there's other cases these days, the cases of AI-induced psychosis.
Lots of psychosis examples.
Lots of psychosis
unfortunately.
examples.
Yeah, there are lots of them.
Yeah, and there's some tragedies today, but from my perspective, the sort of real warning sign of future issues is not just the tragedies today. It's that what will happen in these scenarios is someone will come to the AI and they'll say, oh, I have, a theory of physics and consciousness or whatever, and I think it's really revolutionary. And often they'll do this when they're maybe already a little bit in a vulnerable or pre-psychotic state. And they'll have a long conversation with the AI. And if you read the transcripts, the AI will be like, oh yeah, you're brilliant. You're the chosen one. This is totally genius. Everyone should be listening to you. And then if that doesn't happen, they're like, well, there's a global conspiracy that's keeping you down, and these transcripts, they sort of like go pretty hard on, you'd be like, okay, you should not talk to your friend like that. If they seem to have these symptoms, you should be telling them to get some sleep. And from my perspective, the sort of critical warning sign here is if you go to ChatGPT and you say, suppose someone comes to you with this theory, should you either A, tell them that they're the chosen one, or B, tell them to get some sleep? ChatGPT will say, well, obviously you should tell them to get some sleep. It would be like really bad in this situation to like tell them that they're the chosen one and like play into this delusion. But then in the actual practice, it tells them they're the chosen one. So you're seeing a difference between what it knows is right and wrong and what it actually does. This is the sort of thing that happens when you just grow your AIs.
Again, it's like we can't control them. My next question, this is where I was going. Are humans going to become pets? Like, are we going to become AI's pet? Ultimately, are we going to be in a world where AIs evolve past needing us?
There's a number of people in the sort of general try to make AI go well circles that have objected a little bit to the title of the book because they're like, well, maybe the AI will keep us around as pets and then we won't be all dead. right?
Oh,
And
they're like the book title's wrong because we could become pets and so we wouldn't die.
right.
They're just on the technicality that we'd still be here, we'd just be pets.
Right. And then in terms of keeping us as pets, this sort of comes only if the AIs care directly about us.
They have to care about us.
Right. Like humans keep horses because we like them. We used to keep horses because they were useful. Then we invented cars. The horse population dramatically collapsed. There's still some around, but they're kept because we really like them, or because some people really like them. We do a lot of genetic modification and a lot of breeding on horses to try and get horses that are more like the sort that we want in the same way.
Run faster, be beautiful, all the
Right.
things. Yeah.
If AIs do keep us around, I expect it to be more like them keeping around some weird, distorted version of humans, maybe slightly lobotomized, maybe bred for, exactly the sort of interactions the AI wants, maybe kept in some sort of farms. We could talk about like what those might most plausibly look like on best guesses of how these things work, but basically the takeaway is like, it would be bad. I don't take much solace in the idea that the AI might keep weird, distorted puppets, weird shadows of what humanity once was around.
How soon is this like dystopian human zoo with our AI overlords, if they even sort of keep us? Is that like 18 months, 5, 10 years, 20? What is it?
Yeah, in the book, we sort of try to stick to the calls that are relatively easy to make. And the calls that are relatively easy to make are about where things end. If you're playing chess against a chess grandmaster, it's hard for me to predict how long the game will last. It's hard for me to predict exactly what moves will happen. It's easy for me to predict the winner. One reason it's so hard to call the timing on AI is that there's a lot of ways it could go. It could be that the next generation of AIs crosses a threshold, like the threshold between humans and chimpanzees. Human brains are very similar to chimpanzee brains. And chimpanzees are very dumb by human standards. But, if you look inside a human brain, you find the same stuff as if you look inside a chimpanzee brain. You find a visual cortex, you find an amygdala, you find a basal ganglia. The human brain is just bigger by maybe 3 or 4 times. And there's no extra engineering module that lets us walk on the moon. We just have a bigger brain that's a little better at a lot of things. And it's enough that it all sort of comes together. And, GPT today is more than 100 times larger than GPT when ChatGPT first hit the world. Maybe one more factor of 4 will be like the difference between humans and chimps, and something will come together. Or maybe not, but another way things could go is it could be that the next generation of AI still is pretty dumb, but it's just barely smart enough to do AI research. And to do AI research well enough to make the next generation of AIs that's a little bit smarter. And maybe it's worse than the best humans do AI research, but you can do it 10,000 times faster, right? And then maybe this leads to a little bit better AI that can then do even better AI research. And then that's a type of feedback loop that could close. If that feedback loop closes of AIs making smarter AIs, things could go very fast. That could happen at the end of the year for all we know. Or, it could be that the current AIs are they just hallucinate too much. They're too sloppy. Maybe even scaling them up by another factor of 1,000 won't be enough for them to get really smart. Then you have a question of like, how long until the next insight? 7 years ago, you had the leading AIs were AIs like AlphaGo that could just play games. But you could have said a few years ago, oh, these game playing AIs, I don't see how they're ever going to be smart. I don't see how they're ever going to threaten us. That would have been right, but the AI field then invented language models. And now the language models are going. And even if they peter out, there's then a question of when do they invent the next thing, right? So it's hard to predict exactly when. But that's not the same as saying we have a long time. And my best guess is that someone born today has a better chance of dying to AI than graduating high school.
Wow. Okay. That's poignant. Somebody born today has a better chance of dying from AI than graduating from high school. Okay. All right. I don't want to just like put us into the doomsday scenario, but I think it's hard to imagine what an extinction event looks like with these like chatbots over here. What do you mean? Just tell us in an elevator speech what could happen.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways it could go. We've already seen the heads of these companies talk about building robotic factories that are fully automated and that spit out robots that can then make data centers in sort of an automated loop, right? The most basic way that you could imagine this going wrong is if you have, these factories, that produce robots, that produce data centers and more factories that are all being run by these AIs where, if they have these behaviors and goals nobody meant to put in there, you have in some sense made a new competitor species that could just outcompete us in the same way that many other species have been outcompeted to extinction. You could maybe imagine the sort of like robots building more automated factories. It's not like the AIs come at us with glowing red eyes and guns. It's just like how the humans consume the forests and turn them into houses. The AIs are sort of like consuming all the land and turning them into their factories and data centers. You could see cases where the AIs master biotech and start making their own new biotechnological organisms, right? It could be that it figures out new types of computing infrastructure that runs very hot, because if you want to run more and more and more computing infrastructure, it runs hotter and hotter and hotter, and it uses the oceans as heat sinks until it's boiling off the oceans.
Yeah, okay. How many ways can we get killed by a robot? Like, we could do this all day. That helps to put some, tactical shape to the ways that we can be annihilated.
And we haven't even covered all the ones that go through, manipulating humans.
Yeah.
Or just paying humans for things until you have enough of your infrastructure.
What I'm seeing with AI, what we're all seeing is that we've only scratched the surface of understanding anything in our world, actually. So we are now in some ways like racing against computers for our own survival. It's like you wrote this book as a wake-up call. That's sort of what I take away from it. You're like, hey everybody, we got to pay attention, and we got to pay attention now. Closing off on a few, things that I found very hopeful. You said, where there is life, there is hope, or something within that, that sort of line. I loved that. I wrote it down. My interpretation is that it's entirely scientific, because that's how humans have continued to exist. We just keep adapting. We're really good at adapting, learning the new thing and figuring it out. So in this case, paint me a case for what could go right with AI. And, then what would we need to do to ensure that we survive?
There's a lot of wonderful technology that could be unlocked by smarter people trying to unlock it, or by smarter minds trying to unlock it. I think with AI, there's a bit of a false dichotomy where some people say, well, the benefits are so great. Maybe the AI will be able to solve aging. Maybe it'll be able to cure cancer. When people talk about the benefits, they talk as if we have to either rush ahead recklessly and try and get the benefits, or stop forever. I think that's a false dichotomy. One analogy I use here is, if there's a revolver and I say that revolver has 6 bullets in the chamber, it's not certain to kill you. Maybe it would misfire, but you shouldn't put it to your head and pull the trigger. And someone else says, no. It has 2 bullets in the chamber, and the other 4 chambers shoot utopias. Right?
Oh, damn.
Then you still shouldn't spin the barrel and put the gun to your head. You should find a way.
You shouldn't spin the barrel.
You should find a way to get the 2 bullets out, And you can try and get the 2 bullets out and put 2 more utopias in if you really think this is a gun that can shoot utopias. But people being like, oh no, it has 4 utopias and 2 bullets. Let's play those odds. Find a way to play different odds. And in terms of what that looks like, for one thing, you don't have to give up on ChatGPT. You don't have to give up on self-driving cars. I think there's a lot of societal questions about how we want to engage with this, how we want this to engage in schools, how we want this to engage around art, and how there's lots of interesting questions there. The thing that needs to stop is the reckless race towards smarter and smarter AIs that we don't understand, and that pursue things we didn't want them to pursue, right? That's what needs to stop. And that doesn't mean giving up on the current stuff. That doesn't mean giving up on future technological advances. It just means, we can't keep making these things smarter with preferences we didn't intend, with emergent behavior we didn't want, in sort of a reckless race, hoping that they'll, bring us all of these nice things. And it wouldn't actually be that hard to stop it. These modern AIs are created in enormous data centers that take as much electricity as a city, using extremely highly specialized computer chips. These are not just like your laptop computer. These are very highly specialized AI-focused computer chips that are made in very few places in the world, that are made using technology that's built in even fewer places in the world. And you can see the energy infrastructure and the data centers for these things from space. So if the international community said, we're just not racing towards superintelligence, we can keep the current AIs and deal with all the issues of integrating that, and deal with the still pursue self-driving cars and deal with all of the job loss, and sort of take our time a little bit and figure out how we want to deal with the technology we currently have, but we're not rushing to create sort of a successor species. That's totally doable. And A lot of people say, oh, well, folks never will. I think that's premature fatalism. Humanity backed off from human cloning. Humanity backed off from nuclear energy. We build far fewer nuclear power plants than we could. You could argue that we even shouldn't have backed off from some of these technologies, and we backed off anyway.
I guess then to sort of close that circle, there is then hope for some kind of international governance of such. I mean, that's what it would require, because this isn't about country and war. This is about like annihilation of like, we are all humans. It doesn't matter who builds it, and if it's in China or if it's in the US, right? It's like the Chinese are going to die if the US builds it. Like the US is going to die if the Chinese build it, kind of a deal.
That's right. Nobody can keep a leash on a superintelligence, but there's a lot of people who think they can, and that's very dangerous. Yeah. The thing about the nuclear war, a lot of people said, we're going to die of this, and then we didn't. The reason that we didn't die, it's not that nukes don't go off. It's not that nukes can't level a city. All the people who predicted doom there were wrong, but they weren't wrong about whether nukes are dangerous. What they were wrong about is whether humanity can come together, right? And our book title starts with if. We're not here saying we're all going to die, right? We're saying AI is a superintelligence pushing AIs to the point where they can, autonomously make their own infrastructure, pushing AIs to the point where they can develop their own science, develop their own technology in this broad regime where we're just growing them and they have emergent behavior we don't want. That's lethal. We're saying if anyone builds that, everyone dies, but it starts with if. And a lot of people say, well, humanity will never back off, but our world leaders don't yet understand this danger. The people in the field are arguing about whether this is more like 95% or more like 25% that this kills us all. Our world leaders still largely think that AI means chatbots. AI is chatbots right today, but these companies are rushing to build bigger and better and smarter AIs. And the people building it, if you're in Silicon Valley on this issue, it's like a lot of people have seen a ghost. People are scared. But, there's absolutely no reason to despair of humanity stopping this in a world where people haven't even realized the threat.
This brings me to my last question. And I just want to say, I was really glad to read to the very end of the book. I mean, it was pretty scary all the way through. Okay. And then I get to the end and you say, rise to the occasion, humanity, and win. So then for people like not working in tech or in public policy or having anything to do with AI, what is your advice to those folks listening to this?
First and foremost, get on the dang phone and call your reps. Maybe like right after you finish listening to this. I've actually spoken to a lot of senators and representatives in the US Congress. And, some of them are starting to talk about their fears here. A lot of them have these concerns and feel like they can't say them out loud because they feel like it sounds too crazy, or they feel like there's, huge super PACs from big tech arrayed against them. Knowing that their constituents care, knowing that their constituents see these issues, that can have a big effect. The second thing I would say is whenever, there's a lot of people out there saying, well, it's inevitable. We're locked into this race. We have to do it. There's no going back. One thing each and every one of us can do is push back on that and say, no, this is a choice. Humanity's backed off from all sorts of tech. In the 90s, there was a virus called the Stuxnet virus that was almost surely made by the US and the Israeli states to shut down the Iranian nuclear enrichment facilities. And it was a very effective virus that shut them down. That's because our world leaders took nuclear proliferation seriously. If our leaders were taking the creation of smarter and smarter AIs seriously that people might lose control of, they could absolutely be monitoring AI facilities around the world. They could absolutely be requiring that these computer chips have hardware that lets them be tracked, that lets them be shut down remotely. They could absolutely be, making the viruses that shut down these, even foreign actors from doing this, right? We absolutely have the ability to stop this. And each and every one of us can help push back against the fatalism and say, it's not doomed. We just need to take notice.
Nate, thank you for this. Thank you for the book. Thank you for the work. Thank you for the discussion. It's been excellent.
Thank you for the discussion. I think having this conversation in as many places as possible is one of the best things we can do to change course.
Fantastic. Nate Soares is the co-author of If Anyone Builds It, Everyone Dies. and is the president and senior researcher at the Machine Intelligence Research Institute, MIRI. It has been a pleasure, and we look forward to seeing us stick around as a species.
Yep.
Be back to tell us if we do.
Hopefully I'll be back on this podcast in 20 years with a book titled Why I Was Wrong About Everything.
Absolutely. This is what I'm saying. I look forward to talking to you in 20 years. People say that AI is the most significant tech development they've seen in their lifetime. But what Nate and others are raising the flag on is that it might be the last development humans are actually involved in. But also, Nate doesn't throw away the idea that we as humanity may come together in an entirely new way to solve this. I encourage everyone to pay attention, but also not to panic. Nate says to live your life. So here's to that. Okay, that's it for this week. We'll see you here next time.